Welcome, friends. My name is Frances, and I am so grateful to be welcoming you tonight to our March First Monday lecture. Welcome to Pendle Hill. As many of you know, we're located on Lenape land on what is now known as Wallingford, Pennsylvania. This year, Pendle Hill is celebrating our 95th anniversary as an ongoing experiment in spiritual learning community. We were founded in 1930, and this year I've been thinking I feel closer to 1930 than I ever have in my life. And in 1930, a group of friends thought what the world needed was for friends and other seekers to come together in learning in a way to prepare themselves for being in the world in this time. And I feel very much that way today. Before I say a little more about our program, I want to welcome you to the technical elements. I'm joined tonight by Pendle Hill staff and guests, resident scholars, resident friends, and the 2026 cohort of the resident student program. I'm also joined online by my colleague Maddie and a wonderful group of residents and students who are going to be supporting Welling in her lecture tonight. For friends online, if you have any technical difficulties or questions, please message tech support and they'll do their best to support you. You may see that we're live streaming this video to our YouTube channel, Pendle Hill USA. In the coming days, we'll send out a link to the recording along with resources from tonight. We've also enabled live transcription, so you're able to access closed caption. It's over there in the barn. And at the end of the lecture, we'll have an opportunity for question and answer. That's what those note cards are for the people here, and for friends online, you'll be able to ask questions in the question and answer box. As always, we remain deeply grateful to the Friends Foundation for the Aging, whose support allows Pendle Hill to continue making our First Monday lecture series and other online offerings free to friends of all ages. I'm really, really grateful to be introducing our speaker tonight. Welling Hall, the Spring 2026 Pendle Hill Artist in Residence, works across multiple medias to explore themes of transformation and healing. Her Swords into Plowshares sculpture series addressing gun violence earned the Diane Ferlato Award for Originality and was featured in a pop-up show at the Friends Committee on National Legislation held in collaboration with the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence. During the 2026 spring term at Pendle Hill, Welling will also partner with fiber artist Chris Miller in creating a casket cover or shroud that will serve as both a memorial and call to action against gun violence. This work will stand as a testament to lives lost and an urgent plea for change, combining the intimate craft of textile work with the weight of collective grief and conviction. A technical note is that Welling's voice is compromised tonight, so she's making all sorts of creative adjustments. She'll be using the microphone, and she'll also be inviting friends to read for her. And a more sober note, I guess, this last sentence about Welling's work around collective grief and conviction feels particularly apt today. I think all of us at some level are wondering, what does it mean to be here, learning together, talking about beauty and vision in a moment like this? And I firmly believe that we need these words and this vision more than ever today. So I'm really grateful, Welling, to invite you. I'll invite us all back into a moment of worship, and you'll speak out of the silence. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It is thank you. It is a joy to be here. Since I'm currently weighing every word, I will not list by name everybody for whom I'm feeling enormous gratitude, but know that even if I am not mentioning your name, I am grateful. In this evening's talk, I will share some about how I became an artist, having not known for the first 50 years or so of my life that was part of who I am. And I will share some musings about the relationship between atrocity and aesthetic engagement or making art. And I will, as we get to the winding up part of the talk, I will share some thoughts about art in the moment of resistance to what is currently happening now in my adopted home of Minneapolis. Although there we'll turn more to music than to the visual arts, but still the arts. So, how is it that no, oh, is Maddie sharing?
Yes.
Okay, I forgot. All right, Maddie. All right. We're seeing the whole square. Yeah. Can you just share? Thank you so much. Okay, next slide. Okay, so click, click, click. All right, so that is who I was 10, 12 years ago. I was a professor of international relations, peace studies at Rome. And I taught courses with titles like Genocide and the Responsibility to Protect, The Bomb, the International Relations of 9/11. In fact, there was one semester when those were the 3 courses I was teaching. And I was quite sunk. Next slide. And some of my friends said, well, and you really need to teach something funny. And so I thought about funny, and I thought about Gilbert Sullivan and Pogo and John Stewart, and then I realized that funny really wasn't what I needed. That a lot of political humor is in fact quite caustic. And I did not need to lay anything caustic on my soul. What I needed was healing. And next slide, please. My wonderful older sister happens to be a Jungian psychoanalyst. And she turned me on to the work of this wonderful thinker named James Hillman, who in his book, A Terrible Love of War, answers the question that the way that we recover, the way that human beings can recover from the horror of war and death and destruction is through intense aesthetic engagement. Next slide. So here are some thoughts about what beauty is. According to the Platonic definition of beauty, beautiful things According to the Platonic definition of beauty, beautiful things delight us because they share 3 conditions: perfection, harmony, which here means symmetry or pleasing proportion, and brightness, or brilliance, or radiance. This is sometimes called the great theory of beauty, and it has historically been aligned with theological ideas, such as theologian Karl Barth's idea that the Spirit of God communicates God's beauty to the world, both through creation, in the case of natural beauty, and through inspiration, in the case of artistic beauty. That earthly beauty is thus a reflection of divine glory and a sign of the way in which the Spirit is perfecting creation, and that beauty has an eschatological significance, in that it is an anticipation of the restored and transfigured world, which will be the fullness of God's kingdom. In other words, beauty is revelatory of God. These ideas seem to be very close to the sensibility of Fritz Eichenberg, the famous Pendle Hill artist. He made woodcuts for campus, designed the Pendle Hill colophon, did regular illustrations for the Catholic Worker. Fritz wrote the Pendle Hill pamphlet, Art and Faith, in which he states that great art is an internal manifestation of the human spirit, which can still make us choke with emotions, can make our hearts beat faster, can purify us and bring us closer to God. Eichenberg believes that we are living in a time of decline of the arts because of the loss of man's faith in his own creative powers. He further writes, a work of art is conceived in joy and agony. It grows in ceaseless toil and is delivered in painful ecstasy. Then comes the slump, the sleep of exhaustion, the slow regeneration of spent energy and substance, followed by a period of scrutiny and doubt, and finally the awareness of new thoughts stirring and growing inside. A ceaseless urge sweeps the artist along, prodding him, rewarding him with occasional flashes of deep insight and revelation, then again plunging him into darkest despair, leaving him tantalizingly short of the goal of final perfection.
That's Fritz Eichenberg. That's not me. But the idea that there's something perfect about beauty was something that I was hampered by for a while, I think. And my first explorations in beauty, next slide, please, were engaging with a class that I was teaching about genocide at the time and encouraging students to share some thoughts about things that they found beautiful at the end of class in order to help us really get from class to class. And somehow I was imagining that students were going to show up with things like, I don't know, woodcuts, great masterpieces. These are things that I find beautiful, but no. Students came to class with teddy bears that were falling apart and tattoos of love, and every single manifestation of beauty that they wanted to share in that class was simultaneously a manifestation of beauty and love. At the next slide, please. Because my title at the time at Earlham was Plowshares Professor of Peace Studies, I started thinking about how do I, and I knew that there was great art about this topic, and I also knew that I knew nothing about actually beating a sword into a plowshare. So I started thinking about how do I learn more about what it actually means to beat a sword into a plowshare.
Isaiah 2:4. He shall judge between the nations and shall arbitrate for many peoples. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. Some metaphors do not die.
Slide.
Oh.
Next slide.
Oh, sorry. Some metaphors do not die. They have a perennial power to evoke response. They seem to be an inexhaustible source of semantic innovation, an endless reservoir of significance. They generate new metaphors that cluster around and enrich them and draw vitality from them. Theorists have coined the term root metaphor for these extraordinarily enduring and power-tensive images. A root metaphor is one that, like the root system of a tree in relation to its nutrients in the soil, draws together in a living synthesis numerous, diverse cognitive and affective elements and nourishes ever new growth in meaning. That's from Sandra Schneider, The Revelatory Text.
A wonderful feminist theologian, well worth exploring. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So here are a number of different artistic representations of the idea of swords into plowshares, and I will return to some of them later in the talk, but the point being that this is very much the kind of root metaphor that Sandra Schneider is talking about in terms of regularly generating new ideas of what it means to beat a sword into a plowshare. Next slide, please. Immediately prior to my artistic journey, I was in Cambodia, and I have visited many atrocity museums in my life, many atrocity museums, including, for example, the Holocaust Museum in DC, the atrocity museums in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, all have some kind of shrine in them or a prayer room or some place of contemplation, some place that makes a pivot, invites a pivot toward thinking about healing. The 12th Slang Atrocity Museum in Phnom Penh has nothing like that. You are dumped immediately from the horrors of the museum onto the street of Phnom Penh. And after I left this the museum, I spent the days wandering around, taking pictures of lotus flowers. And this lotus flower will return. But before we return, next slide, please. Oh, actually, you were on that slide. Emily has.
War and the violence authorized by what Africana scholar Emily Towns calls the fantastic hegemonic imagination are both death-dealing. They kill bodies and souls. In the Christian era, volumes of theology have been drafted for the task of rationalizing arguments for war and evaluating if war has been conducted justly. The theology at work in Isaiah 2:4 is about creating life where death and suffering have been the rule. These verses do not envision the return to an idyllic past. They envision a new ordering for creation that does not yet exist but must be made. As narrative theologian Paul Ricoeur writes, poetic and mythic symbols, for example, do not just express nostalgia for some forgotten world. They constitute a disclosure of an unprecedented world, an opening into other possible meanings which transcend the established limits of our actual world and function as a recreation of language. Theopoetics is the creative work of making this undisclosed world be so. If the task of theopoetics is to disclose an unknown world of life to a world that is consumed by death and necrophilia, what language can it speak? Finding a way to articulate the unspeakable, either because it burns too close to the wick or because, being unknown and unknowable, we are in the land of the ineffable, is the challenge of theopoetics. Coincidentally, or is it synchronistically, brain science tells us that in trauma, or during flashbacks of traumatic events, the part of the brain that governs speech in the left hemisphere shuts down. In trauma, there are quite literally no words. Language falters in the abyss. It fractures at the site of trauma. One of the consequences of war and political violence that mimics war is that people, perhaps even generations of people, are traumatized. Society falters, its entire imagination consumed by war and preparation for war. Peace is disimagined, even unspeakable.
So peace is literally unimaginable and cannot be spoken about. How is it imagined? How might it be imagined? And this is where I am interested in the question of how art might be revelatory. Next slide.
First, works of art break down established categories and values. In other words, art can be transgressive when it challenges the dominant imaginary that the world is thus and must always be so. Authoritarian leaders close down art exhibits because they invite viewers to question social realities. Previewing what comes next, it is no accident that the city so viciously designated for revenge and retribution by the Trump regime is a city of artists. There are more persons employed in the arts in Minneapolis than in any other congregational district in the country. Congressional district in the country. Here we are looking at a bicycle made by the Peace Arts Cambodia project. The project worked with art students and survivors of landmine explosions to create works of art from AK-47 and M16 rifles discarded throughout the country. The achieved goal was for victims of war to create symbols of peace from the tools of war.
Next slide.
Second, art works when it entices viewers to engage both emotionally and cognitively with an important theme at the same time. In 2008, when Reyes was commissioned to make public art for a botanical garden, the artist learned that the surrounding district had the highest rate of gun deaths in Mexico. To create his project, Palas por Pistolas, pistols into spades, Reyes created short videos to illustrate the behavior of surrendering a gun, the process of melting the guns down for raw material for spades, and the relationship between trees and climate change. Over the course of 5 years, 1,527 guns were surrendered, 1,527 spades were created, and 1,527 trees were planted. Reyes says that although he is glad to get guns out of circulation and plant trees, his real goal is to create new stories, since stories change the world.
Next slide, please.
Third, when successful, art expresses an ambiguity that provokes, not an explicitness that terminates wonder and analysis. Each of these reasons connects with musings about what happens with theological imagination. What are we looking at here? What is the artist trying to say? These are rhetorical questions for now.
Next slide, please. Well, so that's a lot of background to that. Oh, sorry. A lot of background about what was going on as I was thinking about how I might try to, what it meant to beat a sword into a plowshare. And I was very fortunate that I was able to write a grant to work with a young metalsmith to teach me how to beat a sword into a plowshare. And he very quickly did not take a lot of convincing. He very quickly persuaded me that it was going to be very difficult for me to forge hot steel. and instead, I turned to the idea of the lost wax casting method, and lots of permutations about what I might make and how I might convey this idea. Next slide, please. And very, very early design was I was going to somehow melt these bullet shells down and make a pair of shears that embodied a peace sign. Next. But I didn't like that idea. I found it did not appeal to me. I thought it was too angular. I thought it was too, something about it was aggressive in a way I didn't like. And I decided I wanted to rather have an organic design that flowed into, was somehow embraced, surrounded the harder object. Next. So remember those lotus flowers from Cambodia? These lotus flowers came back as I thought about how I would create this pair of shears, the sword into plowshares, shears, which would in this incarnation blend lotus flower petals and the combat knives. Next. Okay, so we're going directly into that process. Yeah, next. This is drawing the designs on wax. I luckily had a friend who taught at a university that had an active ROTC program that collaborated with NATO, and she was able to get me some spent NATO ammunition. I also asked the Richmond chief of police for some bullet shells and dropped about 100 pounds of them on the porch. Next. These are just process designs. Next. Next, this is all part of the casting process, making the wax. Somebody has sprung.
The shears took 3 weeks to make, working under the constant supervision of a mentor for 40 hours a week. Drawing, carving, refining, weighing, melting, casting, grinding, sanding, soldering, machining, riveting, engraving, and polishing, and definitely some processes I can't remember. I have forgotten. My mind and body were completely focused on the same task. They had to be. Some aspects of the process were physically dangerous, such that if I had taken my mind off the work, I would have been injured. I learned the hard way that if you want to make shears, starting with bullet shells is a bad idea. On the other hand, if you have bullet shells and you need shears, it can be done.
So there, that's an example of intense aesthetic engagement. And I also, let's see, next. Here I want to come back to that great theory of beauty that,
I can use the mic.
sorry, great theory of beauty that I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, that things that are beautiful are perfect, harmonious, and radiant. Those are combat knives. You could say those are perfect, harmonious, and radiant. I think they are obscene. Next. This is just another shot of the process, weighing the shells to be melted down, and turned out to be next not work so well because we thought that they were brass. Here they're getting ready to go into the crucible next, and being melted down next, and more of the molding process next. Pouring the molten metal in next. And that dot in the center indicates there's a sign of trouble there, that somehow we've gotten the weight calculations wrong, and the weight calculations were wrong because what we were told was brass was probably had some other stuff in it, or clearly had other stuff in it. It was not pure brass. Next. And this is really the sign of trouble. This is an incomplete casting. These are the sort of the cover for the blades that then requires some repair in order to fix. But next, and does that little video work? That's when I knew they worked for the first time. That was a cool feeling. Next. Oh, yeah, and that's one side. That's actually the side that's down. So if you look at them outside, yeah, you see the reverse side. You don't see that side. But that's the side that has the bullet as the rivet. Next.
He shall judge between the nations and shall arbitrate for many peoples. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Micah 4:3. Micah repeats Isaiah's words, or perhaps it is the other way around. It is, in either case, the root metaphor is repeated. Artists find multiple ways to express the idea, doing the ministry that Bergman describes in the prophetic imagination as they nurture, nourish, and evoke a consciousness and perception alternative to the consciousness and perception of the dominant culture around us. The dominant culture has accepted war and gun violence in ways too numerous to count, inflicting trauma on individuals and generations.
So while I was working on this project, next. The United Nations was involved in negotiating a conventional arms trade treaty, and one of the mottos that was picked by one of the NGOs that was working on this treaty was that the world today produces 2 bullets per person per year. 2 bullets per person per year. So 2 bullets per person got kind of in my craw as something that I wanted to illustrate or respond or testify about. Next. And so I'm just showing you some pictures of some inspiration. The picture on the left is a sculpture by the Chinese conceptual artist Ai Weiwei, who does some wonderful things with interiority and cutting through spaces and seeing into spaces. And the image on the right, you may recognize as a child's toy, or the invisible woman. And I was trying to figure out is what do I do in order to convey this idea of 2 bullets assigned per person? Next. So the next stage was to I did some laser cutting of common people images, and if I knew the graphic artist who designed these common people images, I would give credit to the artist who did those common people images. They're sort of like highway sign images, and I cut out multiple layers of those images with a laser cutter out of acrylic. Next. And created molds for each of these figurines. Next. Working with a really toxic kind of rubber, latex and toxic. Some kind of mold making material. It's bad for you. Next.
Making art can be dirty, hard work. Very different than a conception I used to have of making art as something like the disembodied work of Hegelian beautiful souls who draw pretty pictures in idyllic surroundings, serenaded by Greek muses. In this case, working with epoxy resin is toxic. That's why I'm wearing a respirator, working underneath a vent hood.
Next. Next. These are the figurines that you see on the frame outside as they have just emerged from the mold, and they were, let me tell you, disgusting. Kind of like if you ever worn nail polish, if you've ever tried to take nail polish off, and it's in this gooey, yucky, gooey stage. And it was, again, several weeks of sanding with progressively finer and finer and finer and finer layer of grit. And then it also turned out that these are extremely Broadway, they're extremely brittle. Next. Well, there's a, for those of you who aren't here in person, that's your consolation prize. Next. My next exploration took place at the Wood Studio at Pendleton School of Craft in North Carolina. And there I am posing with a happier sculpture that is constructed from a seat that I took off of a piano stool, attached to some legs that I took off a piano bench. My next assignment as a student at Pendleton Wood Studio was to make a box. And in the next.
The idea arose in me of making a clay coffin in order to live awfully into the Western symbolic, in which it is okay to be the victim of a school shooting. In the world of the fantastic, hegemonic, imaginary, that world is tamed and acceptable. And through the research and design process, I settled on a sculpture that was modelled on a toddler's push toy that had a coffin on wheels for a base and a wooden toy assault rifle for a handle.
Next. This is part of the design process, creation process. Next. Gluing. Next. And there are some pictures of the final object, which you see outside. One of the lessons that I received in working on this project was from a young man who had a bench next to mine, and I knew that just from a variety of different exchanges that we were probably on opposite ends of the political spectrum and across multiple dimensions. And when this work was drawing to completion, he said to me, you know, I think that might have even more impact if it had a rifle bullet in it. I said, I don't have any rifle bullets. He said, I do. And he went out to his truck and came back and handed me a rifle bullet so that my sculpture could have more impact. And every fiber of my being knows that if I had been debating with him about gun violence for the past 6 weeks, that would not have happened. One very quick next slide. This is the final working on the final sculpture in this series that I had not titled until yesterday, but I'm going to let Emily read it now. The next one. Next.
This sculpture looks to me like a crown of thorns that has morphed into a crown of bullet casings. But what is the message that it is conveying? Does it mean that Jesus has been crucified by bullets and is suffering alongside little children and other innocents who are also victims of gun violence? Is the sculpture even read as condemning gun violence? Or, as one viewer suggested to me, does it come across as a brutal endorsement of gun culture? Does it somehow reinforce rather than challenge a culture of lucid sinning in which God coexists with gun violence while humans do nothing about it? Perhaps the biggest problem might be a raised expectation that the sculpture has a coherent message when, in fact, there is not a logically coherent message to be had about Jesus' suffering and mass shootings. Maybe the more productive stance is to feel that there is some spirit that links the incarnation with the suffering of mass shootings, and wonder what ideas we must hold in tension to feel that, since we can't understand it. So that leads me to the question.
Next.
Why should we suppose that the presence of the Holy Spirit in works of art should be confined to their beauty? We should look at other functions of art besides its ability to us. For example, its
Delight to use to delight us.
We should look at other functions of art besides its ability to delight us. For example, its symbolic, representative, expressive, and emotionally moving capacities. Patrick Sherry.
And now, in the famous words of Monty Python, now for something completely different. Next. So Patrick Sherry has asked us to think about what are the What are the functions of art? What are the functions of art beyond its ability to delight us? Its symbolic, representative, expressive, and emotionally moving capacities. And I'm going to take a few minutes to just talk about, actually they're going to talk about the functions of art in this moment. And in case you don't know, that's a photograph of ICE agents immobilizing a protester and spraying chemical weapons directly in his face. Next.
Psalm 27 feels especially descriptive of the militarized reality, defiant mood, and eschatological hope of Minneapolis today. The lyrics of African-American composer Thomas Jefferson's anthem, heard in this evening's prelude, are drawn from Psalm 27. This excerpt is verses 1 through 6 of the psalm. The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When evildoers assist me to devour my flesh, my adversaries and foes, they shall stumble and fall. Though an army encamped against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war rise up against me, yet I will be confident. One thing I asked of the Lord, this I seek, to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and inquire in his temple. For he will hide me in his shelter in the day of trouble. He will conceal me under the cover of his tent. He will set me high on a rock. Now my head is lifted up above my enemies all around me, and I will offer in his tent sacrifices with shouts of joy, and I will sing and make melody to the Lord.
Next. Next. Oh, sorry, no. Sorry, stay there.
My recent testimony to Republican Senator Todd Young of Indiana during a Friends Committee on National Legislation lobby visit. What is happening in Minnesota today is difficult to find words for. I have only seen the kind of military force deployed on the streets of Minneapolis when I was in Franco's Spain as a teenager and saw his private military patrolling every street with machine guns. I felt the fear when I visited the USSR, with friends recalling stories of unmarked black vans pulling up to apartment buildings and disappearing people in the middle of the night. I wonder what you would feel if you saw masked, unidentified federal agents breaking down the doors of US citizens and legal immigrants and pulling them out into the street in their underwear in the middle of the night. What would you feel if you heard a chief of police describing how his off-duty black and brown officers are harassed by ICE agents? What would you do if you knew that US citizens and other legal residents were released from detention centers in the dead of the night in the middle of an unpopulated area without coats or phones or IDs in the middle of winter? I'm glad that Senator Young has responded to the horror of masked, unidentified federal agents shooting and killing US citizens in broad daylight on a public street in front of many witnesses. I do not know how he has responded to the Department of Justice weaponizing the legal system to go after the families of those killed. Based on my professional training, I would call those Soviet methods of intimidation. Even though there are many, many more immigrants in Texas and Arizona, what we observe in Minnesota is that the Trump administration is using military tactics to defeat what they say is an invasion of immigrants supported by the quote assassins and domestic terrorists who have risen up in Minnesota. Those words are simply insanity, or they are political retribution against a deep blue state governed by a man who ran against Trump. When the Department of Homeland Security says that the ICE agents will leave Minnesota when the state turns over its voter registration rolls to the federal government, we know that this military presence has almost nothing to do with immigration enforcement. Despite claims that there has been a drawdown, children are still afraid to go to school. The economy is suffering because people are afraid to commute to work. Just this week, unidentified masked agents have been seen walking door to door in Bloomington, a suburb of Minneapolis, peering into the windows of private homes without warrants and intimidating people who dare to record videos of their behavior. How are the people of Minnesota responding to this situation? I wonder if you have ever taken a walk outside when it was 23 degrees below zero. Can you imagine the intensity of the passion and the demand that this cruelty stop when 75,000 people marched for hours at that temperature? We are not only marching. Minnesota has a vibrant civic life. We have the highest rate of voter turnout in the country. We have a culture of caring for our neighbors. We care about the rule of law, due process, and compassion. We are driving people to work. We are shopping and doing laundry for our neighbors. We hold rent fundraisers for people whose income has disappeared. We light up luminary signals that can be seen from the skies. We coordinate the ringing of church bells across the state. And we are singing in record numbers that are continuing to grow. The photo is of 2,000 people gathered to sing songs of compassion and resistance at a Presbyterian church about a mile from my home.
Maddie, can you play the video now? Next. Here we are singing that song. Here we are singing "No One Is Getting Left Behind This Time" in the Target CEO headquarters in downtown Minneapolis. Next. See, I probably can't see that the sign across the bridge in the middle says "No one is illegal on stolen land," which is one of the mottos of the resistance in Minneapolis. And the right-hand sign, "ICE out," that's those are just luminaries seen from planes. Neighbors just gather to make sure that the planes leaving Minneapolis airport saw ICE out on their way out. Francis, it's late, should I show short clips?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so the top one, Ice Hotel 2, is a song that we sang to ICE agents after rehearsing in the singing resistance meets in different churches every Sunday. There's some big churches in downtown Minneapolis that all seat lots of people, 2,000 people. So yeah, Maddie, why don't you play that first one, that top one?
So we're outside the second ICE hotel in downtown Minneapolis, and we're calling these ICE agents to join us with song.
Show us your courage. Show us your courage. Leave this behind. It's okay to change your mind, and you can join us. You can join us anytime. I wrote this yesterday, that's why it's stuck in. It's okay to change your mind. Show us your courage. Show us your courage. Leave this behind. Leave this behind. It's okay to change your mind. And you can join us. You can join us. Join us here anytime. It's okay to change your mind. Courage. Leave us behind. It's okay to change your mind. And you can join us anytime. Keep walking a little bit further.
This is the Singing Resistance group in Minneapolis, a self-organized group of people that use song to call out ICE, calling them to leave their jobs, join the common good. More than 1,500 people out here.
It's okay to change your mind. What's your courage? Leave this behind. It's okay to change your mind. You can join us anytime. It's okay to change.
So one of the reasons, I just want to point out one of the reasons that is so important, in addition to being joyful. There's a lot of citing, we hear a lot of citing of the very important study by Erica Chenoweth about successful strategic nonviolence. And the figures frequently quoted, that's like, we need to get 3.5% of the population out on the streets. But the other thing that is not so frequently cited is that it has to be accompanied by successfully encouraging law enforcement to defect.
Yeah.
So I love the calling in of the ICE agents to leave what they are doing as part of the singing resistance. Okay, and then this other short video is the art sled rally, took place in January, and at Powderhorn Park, right next door to where these many awful violence and killings had happened. And there was question about whether or not the art sled rally should take place. And here's some organizers talking about it.
You know, everybody's been feeling so unsettled and so, you know, you think, oh, should we be doing this when things are going, but you know, I had so much help. This is Josh.
Hi.
We actually have 6 sleds. I also did the back here, the de-icer bottle as well. Yes.
next, this is the next, the next video is not in Minneapolis, but about Minneapolis. Some dancers from Broadway and the Kennedy Center performing in downtown DC.
See that pretty little sparrow, but looking back at me. She could fly, she could fly. They could fly. Tried to keep her down, but there was nothing they could do. She could fly, she could fly.
Dorothea Bloom cites philosopher and art critic Herbert Reed in her Pendle Hill pamphlet, Encounters with Art. The artist resolves the current crisis by a leap forward into a new and original state of sensibility. He revolts against existing conventions in order to create a new convention, more in accordance with a contemporary consciousness.
Pendle Hill icon Fritz Eichenberg worried that today modern artists are supposed to entertain and not discuss or illustrate social problems. If the artists should feel a social concern, if he wants to speak up against man's cruelty to man, he is condemned as an agitator, a subversive. The good news, I think, is that there is a great deal of evidence to the contrary. Art, both the beautiful and the symbolic, representative, expressive, and emotionally moving, can indeed galvanize a culture to demonstrate a different way of living in the world.
Next.
Welling, thank you so much. I was telling Welling I'm feeling a very strong leading to spend some time in worship with you all. I feel it's a moment where we need some extra prayer. So I'm gonna invite us into about 15 minutes of worship. And then after that, we'll collect questions and questions in the chat. You can send, or online, you can send to the question and answer. And we'll compile them and ask just a couple of questions to Welling to save her voice for a few minutes at the end. Maddie, thank you so much for your support online. I'm wondering if you're seeing any questions that you can share with us.
There is one comment. A participant says, I am glad that despair, as I feel so often these days, is part of a larger cycle that includes inspiration/guidance, delight, and creativity. The mystery is that we release and express, rest, turn to spirit and each other, and resume.
Question from the room. What beautiful things do you hope to create while you're here at Pendle Hill? Will your creations be on display here for a while or just tonight? And are you still teaching anything? Oh yeah, thank you.
Am I teaching in any way? Well, I'm here now. I'm an artist in residence, so I get to consider that part of my ministry, part of my teaching, although I'm not teaching a formal class. The sculptures that are on display now will be on display only tonight. And let's see, there are several kinds of projects that I will be working on while I'm here. Francis already mentioned the collaboration with fiber artist Chris Miller that will be happening in April. I'm also thinking about a project that is directly responsive to the situation in Minneapolis and is inspired by the song "No One Is Getting Left Behind This Time." And I was on my way here, gifted with many bags of scrap material by Quaker quilters in Indiana, which will somehow get into some kind of fiber art piece that is about nothing getting left behind. And I have been shown that I've been given a little tour of the wood shop. And coming from Minneapolis, I am very much in a mending and repair mode. And I believe that Bob and I are having visions of repairing some chairs.
Maddie, any further questions from online?
Yes. One person says, I just want to say that this was an extraordinary presentation. Thank you. And then a question, in the process of carrying out your art project, did you receive a message from the spirit within that was new to you or unexpected?
Yeah, yes. I mean, prior to these projects, I had no conception of myself as an artist. So that's kind of big. In fact, it was at the Richmond Art Museum where one of these pieces was on display, where I thought of myself as a political scientist who just happened to have a piece of art on display, where one of my students said, "Are you an artist?" I thought, oh my gosh, I guess so. And then I guess I did tell the story about the young man who was moved to give me a rifle bullet to make my sculpture more impactful, and that felt really big. That felt really big, and that was probably a turning point for me in terms of thinking about the attention that I wanted to pay to affective and emotional rather than rational ways of knowing. Which was then a big deal in terms of my trying to decide whether I wanted to go to, after I left Rome, whether I wanted to go to art school or go to seminary, and spent a year doing an online program at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, and then went to seminary, where I studied theology and the arts.
We're getting very close to the end, so friends who are here will have a chance to continue to talk to Welling. Do you have any final words you want to share, Welling?
My voice is gone. I appreciate your indulgence.
I am so grateful, Welling, that you are one of the teacher learners of the spring term. This feels like such a fitting way to start our learning for the term together. And for friends who are not enrolled in the spring term, thank you for joining us in this learning. This is part of the larger community that's learning alongside us this spring. And I hope you'll continue to learn with us. There's a lot of opportunities. I think Maddie's going to put some in the chat. I'll note that our Quaker Institute, May 1st through 4th, is on themes of song as a metaphor and practice of resistance. And Welling's going to do a workshop. She doesn't know about what yet. Neona Span and Annie Patterson are going to be our keynote speakers. I think it's going to be a really beautiful way of carrying forward some of the learnings from today. With that, I'll invite us into a breath of silence to close our time.